The rain pounded mercilessly against the wooden boardwalk of Malad City, Idaho Territory, turning the already muddy Main Street into a treacherous river of sludge. Katherine Sullivan stood frozen outside Harrison's general store, clutching her now soaked parcel of fabric to her chest, cursing her decision to leave her umbrella at home despite the threatening gray clouds that had loomed all morning. Her new blue dress, the one she had spent weeks saving for, was now clinging uncomfortably to her slender frame, and her honey blonde hair hung in dripping tendrils around her face. It was 1876, and Katherine had only been in Malad City for 3 months. The small but growing town in the Idaho Territory was nothing like her home back in Boston, but after her parents' death, living with her judgmental aunt had become unbearable. When the opportunity to teach at the new schoolhouse arose, she had gathered what little courage she possessed and ventured west, determined to create a new life for herself. "Miss, you'll catch your death standing out here like that," came a deep voice from behind her. Katherine turned, startled, to find herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes the color of warm whiskey. He stepped forward, removing his wide-brimmed hat and holding it over her head to shield her from the downpour. "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Ethan Walker," he said with a small nod. "I'd tip my hat to you, madam, but as you can see, it's otherwise occupied." Despite her discomfort, Katherine felt a smile tug at her lips. "Katherine Sullivan, the new schoolteacher." "Ah, so you're the one the town's been buzzing about," he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "I've been away driving cattle up from Texas. Just got back yesterday." Katherine studied him briefly. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jawline softened by the hint of a beard. There was something trustworthy about him that made her feel at ease despite their sudden meeting. "Do you have far to go, Miss Sullivan?" he asked, glancing at the torrential rain. "The schoolhouse." "It's at the other end of town," Katherine sighed. "I'm afraid I'll be completely drenched by the time I arrive." Ethan looked thoughtful for a moment. "I've got my wagon just around the corner. I'd be happy to give you a ride if you'd allow it." Katherine hesitated. Back in Boston, accepting a ride from a stranger would be unthinkable for a proper lady. But this wasn't Boston, and standing in the pouring rain hardly seemed the proper alternative. "That would be most kind, Mr. Walker," she finally said. "It's no trouble at all," he replied, and then, in a surprisingly gentlemanly gesture, he removed his long duster coat and draped it over her shoulders, keeping his hat held above her head. "This will keep you a bit drier until we reach the wagon." The coat was warm and carried the scent of leather, horses, and something distinctly masculine. Katherine clutched it around herself gratefully as Ethan guided her around the corner to where his wagon stood waiting, a pair of chestnut horses stamping impatiently in their harnesses. "My apologies for the state of it," he said as he helped her climb onto the bench seat. "I've been on the trail for weeks." "It's perfect," Katherine assured him, settling onto the wooden seat as Ethan quickly rounded the wagon and climbed up beside her. The rain drummed against the canvas covering, creating a cozy barrier between them and the storm. As they began to move down the muddy street, Katherine stole glances at her rescuer. There was something about him, a quiet confidence, perhaps, that intrigued her. His hands were strong and sure on the reins, and though his clothes were trail-worn, there was a dignity in the way he carried himself. "Have you been in Malad City long, Mr. Walker?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Born and raised here," he replied. "Though I spend most of my time on the trail these days. My father left me a small ranch just outside of town, and I drive cattle to make ends meet." "It must be a difficult life," Katherine remarked. Ethan shrugged. "It has its moments." "The open country has a way of speaking to a man's soul that's hard to find elsewhere." He glanced at her. "And what brings a Boston lady all the way to our little corner of the territory? I can tell by your accent you're not from around these parts." Katherine smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious?" "To those who have been outside the territory, yes, madam. I came to teach," she said simply. "After my parents passed, there wasn't much left for me in Boston. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Malad City, it seemed providential." "The children here need someone like you," Ethan said thoughtfully. Education's been sorely lacking. Most folks are so busy trying to survive that learning takes a back seat. As they approached the small white schoolhouse at the edge of town, the rain began to lighten. Katherine felt a strange reluctance to have their journey end so soon. "Here we are, Miss Sullivan," Ethan announced, pulling the wagon to a stop. He jumped down and came around to offer her his hand. As she placed her fingers in his, Katherine felt a small jolt that had nothing to do with the damp cold. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Walker," she said as her feet touched the ground. "My pleasure," he replied, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Perhaps I'll see you around town." "Perhaps you will," Katherine answered, feeling a warmth spread through her chest despite her damp clothes. As she handed back his coat, their fingers brushed, and for a brief moment neither of them moved. Then Ethan cleared his throat and stepped back. "You should get inside before the rain starts up again," he advised, putting his hat back on. Katherine nodded, suddenly feeling shy. "Goodbye, Mr. Walker. Goodbye, Miss Sullivan." She watched as he climbed back into his wagon and drove away, wondering if their paths would indeed cross again. Something told her that they would, and the thought made her smile as she turned toward the schoolhouse door. The following morning dawned bright and clear, with no hint of the previous day's downpour save for the puddles that still dotted the street. Katherine arrived at the schoolhouse early, as was her custom, to prepare for the day's lessons. As she was arranging slates on the children's desks, she heard the sound of a horse approaching. Curious, she moved to the window and was surprised to see Ethan Walker dismounting from a handsome bay gelding. He was dressed more neatly than the day before in a clean shirt and vest, his hat held respectfully in his hands. Katherine hurried to the door. "Mr. Walker," she greeted him, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "Good morning." "Miss Sullivan," he replied with a nod. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all. I was just preparing for class. The children won't arrive for another hour." Ethan seemed to gather himself. "I realized after I left you yesterday that your package must have gotten quite wet in the rain." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a brown paper parcel. "I took the liberty of stopping by Harrison's this morning. Mrs. Harrison helped me select some fabric that she thought might replace what was ruined." Katherine was stunned by the thoughtful gesture. "Mr. Walker, that's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly accept, please," he interrupted gently. "Consider it a welcome gift to Malad City." Something in his eyes, a genuine warmth and perhaps a hint of vulnerability, made it impossible for Katherine to refuse. She accepted the package with a grateful smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very thoughtful of you." "It's nothing," he replied, though his expression suggested it was anything but. An awkward silence fell between them, and Katherine found herself wishing she knew what to say to prolong their encounter. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "There's to be a town social on Saturday evening. A bit of music, some dancing. Nothing fancy like you might be used to in Boston, but—" He hesitated. "I'd be honored if you'd allow me to escort you." Katherine felt her heart quicken. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Walker." A smile broke across his face, transforming his rugged features into something quite handsome. "Excellent. I'll call for you at 7 then." 7 would be perfect. As Ethan mounted his horse to leave, Katherine found herself looking forward to Saturday with an eagerness that surprised her. There was something about Ethan Walker that made her feel both comfortable and exhilarated all at once. Throughout the school day, Katherine found her thoughts drifting to the tall cowboy with the kind eyes. Even as she helped little Sarah Jenkins with her letters or reprimanded the Thompson twins for throwing spitballs, part of her mind was occupied with the memory of Ethan holding his hat over her in the rain. When Saturday evening finally arrived, Katherine spent more time than usual on her appearance. She chose to wear her best dress, a modest but flattering blue gown with lace trim, and arranged her hair in a style that was becoming without being too elaborate. As she pinned the last golden strand in place, there was a knock at her door. Katherine took a deep breath to calm her inexplicably fluttering nerves before opening the door. Ethan stood on her small porch, looking handsome in a clean black suit that, while not fashionable by Boston standards, fit him well and highlighted his broad shoulders. His usually unruly dark hair had been tamed, and he was clean-shaven for the occasion. "Miss Sullivan," he said, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Walker," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You're quite handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his suit. As they walked toward the town hall where the social was being held, Katherine was acutely aware of the curious glances they received from townsfolk. It seemed that the new schoolteacher and the local rancher made an interesting pair in the eyes of Malad City. The town hall had been transformed for the occasion, with paper lanterns hanging from the rafters and tables of refreshments lining the walls. A small group of musicians played in one corner, and several couples were already dancing. "Would you care for some punch?" Ethan asked as they entered. "Yes, please," Katherine replied, grateful for the chance to gather her composure. As Ethan moved toward the refreshment table, she was approached by Mrs. Harrison from the general store. "Miss Sullivan, how lovely to see you," the older woman said warmly. "I see you've caught the attention of our Ethan Walker. He's a good man, you know. One of the finest in the territory, though he's had his share of hardships." Katherine's curiosity was piqued. "Hardships?" Mrs. Harrison nodded sagely. "Lost both his parents within a year of each other when he was just 20, his mother to consumption, his father to a fall from a horse. Left him with the ranch and a mountain of debt. He's worked himself to the bone to keep it, driving cattle all over the West. Never complains, though. That's not Ethan's way." Before Mrs. Harrison could elaborate further, Ethan returned with 2 cups of punch. "Evening, Mrs. Harrison," he greeted her. "I see you've been keeping Miss Sullivan company." "Just getting acquainted," Mrs. Harrison replied with a knowing smile. "You two enjoy yourselves now." As the older woman moved away, the musicians struck up a lively tune. "Would you care to dance?" Ethan asked, extending his hand. Katherine hesitated. "I should warn you, I'm familiar with formal Boston waltzes, but I suspect the dances here might be a bit different." Ethan's eyes twinkled. "Don't worry, I'm not much of a dancer myself. We can learn together." The dance was indeed different from what Katherine was accustomed to, faster, more energetic, and considerably less formal. But Ethan proved to be a patient partner, guiding her through the steps with gentle hands and encouraging smiles. By the end of the song, they were both laughing at their missteps. They danced 3 more times before deciding to step outside for some air. The night was clear and cool, with a blanket of stars overhead unlike anything Katherine had ever seen in Boston. "It's beautiful," she breathed, gazing upward. "One of the benefits of the West," Ethan replied, standing close beside her. "The sky seems bigger out here." They walked a little way from the town hall, the sounds of music and laughter fading behind them. Katherine was surprised at how comfortable she felt in Ethan's company, as if they had known each other far longer than a few days. "Mrs. Harrison mentioned you lost your parents," she said softly. "I'm sorry, I know how difficult that is." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "It was hard," he admitted. "Especially watching my mother waste away from consumption. Nothing I could do to help her." He paused. "But that's life out here. It forges you, makes you stronger if it doesn't break you first." "Is that why you became a cattle driver, to save the ranch?" He nodded. "It was all I had left of them. I couldn't bear to lose it too." He turned to look at her. "What about you? Was coming west your way of starting fresh after your loss?" Katherine considered his question. "Partly, but it was more than that. I felt trapped in Boston. My aunt had very clear ideas about what was proper for a young lady, and none of them included independence or fulfillment." She smiled ruefully. "Teaching out here was the most improper thing I could think of doing." Ethan chuckled. "Well, if it's impropriety you're after, you've come to the right place. The West has its own rules." "So I'm discovering," Katherine replied, her eyes meeting his. For a moment they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Ethan gently took her hand in his. "I'm glad the rain brought you to my attention, Miss Sullivan," he said softly. "Very glad indeed." "As am I, Mr. Walker," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They returned to the social hand in hand, both sensing that something significant had shifted between them, though neither could yet name what it was. The weeks that followed were the happiest Katherine had known in a long time. Ethan called on her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers picked from the prairie, or candy from the general store. They took walks together after school, and on Sundays, he would drive her to church in his wagon. Katherine found herself looking forward to these moments with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She had come west to find independence, not to lose her heart to a cowboy, no matter how kind and handsome he might be. One sunny afternoon in early June, Ethan invited her on a picnic. "There's a spot by the creek that I'd like to show you," he said. "It's where I go when I need to think." Katherine accepted eagerly. The school term had ended the previous week, and though she had agreed to teach summer lessons for a few of the children, her schedule was much lighter. Ethan picked her up in his wagon, a picnic basket packed by Mrs. Harrison on the seat between them. As they drove out of town, Katherine felt a sense of anticipation building within her. The spot Ethan had chosen was indeed beautiful, a small clearing beside a bubbling creek, shaded by cottonwood trees and carpeted with wildflowers. He spread a blanket on the ground and helped her arrange their meal. They ate companionably, talking about everything and nothing, her students' progress, his plans for improving the ranch, books they had both read, memories of their childhoods. After they had finished eating, Ethan grew uncharacteristically quiet. He seemed to be gathering his courage for something, and Katherine found herself holding her breath in anticipation. "Katherine," he finally said, using her given name for the first time, "I know you haven't been in Malad City long, and I don't want to rush you, but I find myself thinking about you constantly." He took her hand gently. "You're unlike any woman I've ever met. Strong, independent, educated, but also kind and generous. I was wondering if you might consider, that is, if you might allow me to court you properly." Katherine felt her heart swell with joy. "Ethan, I would like that very much." His face lit up with a smile that took her breath away. "Really?" "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she replied firmly. "These past weeks have been the happiest I've known in a very long time, and much of that happiness is because of you." Ethan moved closer to her on the blanket, his eyes seeking permission. When she didn't pull away, he leaned in slowly and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. It was brief but perfect, a promise of things to come. When they parted, Katherine felt as if something fundamental had shifted in her world. She had come west seeking a new beginning, but she had found something she hadn't even known. She was looking for a connection to another soul that felt as vast and promising as the western sky. As summer progressed, Katherine and Ethan's courtship blossomed. They became a familiar sight in Malad City, the schoolteacher and the rancher, walking arm in arm down Main Street, or sitting together at church on Sundays. Katherine learned more about ranching than she had ever thought possible, and she found herself developing a deep appreciation for the land that Ethan loved so much. In turn, she shared her knowledge of literature and science with him, often reading aloud from her favorite books as they sat on the porch of her small house in the evenings. It wasn't all idyllic, of course. Life in the Idaho Territory in 1876 came with its share of challenges. There were rumors of tensions with some of the local Native American tribes, and the harshness of frontier life was a constant reality. Katherine had to adjust to inconveniences she had never known in Boston: the lack of certain goods, the primitive medical care, the isolation. But through it all, her feelings for Ethan continued to deepen, as did his for her. One evening in late July, they were sitting on Katherine's porch watching the sunset when Ethan brought up a subject that had been on both their minds. "I'll be heading out on a cattle drive next week," he said, his expression troubled. "I shouldn't be gone more than a month, but I hate to leave you." Katherine had known this was coming. Ethan had mentioned the drive before, explaining that it was necessary to sell his cattle before winter and bring in the money that would sustain the ranch through the cold months. "I'll miss you terribly," she admitted, "but I understand why you need to go." He took her hand. "I've been thinking about the future, Katherine, about us." He met her gaze steadily. "When I return from this drive, I want to ask you a very important question, but before I do, I need to make sure the ranch is secure, that I can offer you the kind of life you deserve." Catherine's heart raced. She knew what question he was referring to, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. "Ethan, you don't need to prove anything to me." "Maybe not," he said with a small smile, "but I need to prove it to myself. I want to be worthy of you, Katherine." She reached up to touch his face gently. "You already are." The day of Ethan's departure arrived too quickly. Katherine stood with him at the edge of town, where his cattle and the small group of cowboys he had hired waited to begin the long journey to the railhead in Montana territory. "I'll be back before the first snow," Ethan promised, holding her close. "And I'll write whenever I can." "Be safe," Katherine whispered, fighting back tears. She had never expected to feel this way about anyone, let alone a cowboy in a frontier town thousands of miles from her former home. Ethan kissed her one last time, then mounted his horse. As he rode away, leading his herd and men northward, Katherine felt a sense of emptiness settle over her. The coming weeks stretched before her, bleak and lonely without his presence, but she was determined to make the best of the time. She had her summer students to teach, and she had been considering starting a reading group for some of the women in town who had expressed interest. There was plenty to keep her busy until Ethan's return. What Katherine couldn't have anticipated was how quickly life in Malad City could change. 2 weeks after Ethan's departure, a group of travelers arrived in town, bringing with them a sickness that spread rapidly through the community. The doctor called it influenza, but whatever its name, it was devastating. The young and the elderly were particularly vulnerable, and within days, the town was in crisis. Katherine, who had so far remained healthy, threw herself into nursing the sick, particularly the children she had come to care for so deeply. She moved from house to house, offering what comfort and care she could, applying the limited medical knowledge she had gleaned from books and her own experience. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and worry. She thought often of Ethan, grateful that he was far from the sickness, but anxious that he might return to find the town transformed by tragedy. It was during this dark time that Katherine truly came to understand the strength of the community she had joined. Despite their own suffering, neighbors helped neighbors. Those who remained healthy cared for those who fell ill. Food was shared, chores were done, children were looked after, all without expectation of reward or recognition. One evening, as Katherine was leaving the home of the Johnson family, where both parents and 3 children were recovering from the illness, she was approached by Mrs. Harrison. "Miss Sullivan," the older woman called, hurrying toward her. "I've just received word from Mr. Harrison." He encountered Ethan's cattle drive near the Montana border. Katherine's heart leapt. "Is everything all right?" Mrs. Harrison hesitated. "There was some trouble. A band of rustlers attacked the herd. There was a fight." Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. "Ethan, is he?" "He's alive," Mrs. Harrison assured her quickly. "But he was injured. Mr. Harrison said he's being tended to by a doctor in a settlement just north of here. They expect he'll recover, but it will take time." Relief washed over Katherine, followed immediately by determination. "I need to go to him." Mrs. Harrison looked startled. "But Miss Sullivan, it's nearly 100 miles, and with the sickness here, the worst of the epidemic seems to be passing," Katherine replied firmly. "And I can't stay here knowing Ethan is hurt and alone, despite Mrs. Harrison's concerns and the raised eyebrows of some of the more traditional townsfolk. Katherine made preparations to travel north. Mr. Williams, the local blacksmith whose wife and children Katherine had helped nurse through the worst of the illness, offered to drive her in his wagon. "It's the least I can do," he insisted when Katherine tried to protest. "My Emma and the little ones might not have made it without your help." 2 days later, they set out at dawn. The journey was long and difficult, the trail rough and the weather unpredictable. But Katherine was sustained by her determination to reach Ethan, to see with her own eyes that he was truly on the mend. They arrived at the small settlement of Pine Ridge on the 3rd day. It was little more than a collection of buildings serving the needs of travelers and the scattered ranches in the area, but it boasted a doctor, a gruff older man named Simmons, who had once served as an army surgeon. Katherine found Ethan in a small room at the back of the doctor's house. He was pale and thinner than she remembered, with a bandage wrapped around his upper chest and shoulder, but his eyes lit up when she entered. "Katherine," he said incredulously, as if he couldn't quite believe she was really there. "How did you? Did you really think I would stay away once I heard you were hurt?" she asked, rushing to his bedside and taking his hand in hers. "But it's not proper," he protested weakly, though his fingers tightened around hers. "A lady traveling all this way alone, Mr. Williams accompanied me," she informed him with a smile. "And propriety be damned, Ethan Walker, I needed to see you." A slow smile spread across his face. "I'm beginning to think Boston didn't know what to do with you, Miss Sullivan." "Their loss is my gain," she replied softly. Dr. Simmons had explained to Katherine that Ethan had been shot during the confrontation with the rustlers. The bullet had been removed successfully, but the wound had become infected, leaving Ethan weak and feverish for several days. The worst was past now, but he would need time to regain his strength. "What about the cattle?" Katherine asked as she sat by his bedside. "Your men. Most of the herd got away during the attack," Ethan said grimly. "Jim Taylor, you remember him, my foreman. He's leading what's left to the railhead. 2 of my men were wounded besides me, but they'll recover." He sighed heavily. "It's a serious setback, Katherine. I won't get nearly what I'd hoped for the cattle and the ranch." "The ranch will survive," she said firmly, "and so will you. That's what matters most." Ethan's recovery was slow but steady. Katherine stayed in Pine Ridge, renting a small room above the general store and spending her days helping Dr. Simmons tend to Ethan and his other patients. The doctor, initially skeptical of the city woman, soon came to appreciate her calm efficiency and quick mind. "You've got a talent for healing, Miss Sullivan," he remarked one day as they changed Ethan's bandages together. "Ever considered medicine as a profession?" Katherine laughed. "I think one unconventional career choice is enough for now, doctor. Teaching suits me well." "And motherhood would suit you too, I'd wager," the doctor added with a knowing glance toward Ethan, who was dozing after taking his medicine. Katherine blushed but didn't contradict him. As August gave way to September, Ethan grew stronger. He began taking short walks with Katherine around the settlement, his arm linked with hers for support. During these walks, they talked about everything: their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. "I had such plans," Ethan confessed one evening as they watched the sunset from a bench outside the doctor's house. "I was going to return to Malad City with enough money to make the ranch profitable to build a proper house." He trailed off, his expression troubled. "And now?" Katherine prompted gently. He sighed. "Now I'll be lucky if I can keep the land. Jim sent word that he only got half of what we expected for the cattle. Between the lost stock and the doctor's bills, I'm nearly broke." Katherine considered his words carefully. "Ethan, when you asked to court me, did you think I cared about how much money you had?" He looked at her in surprise. "No, but I wanted to offer you security, comfort. I've had those things," she interrupted. "In Boston, I never wanted for material comforts, but I was miserable." She took his hand. "What I've found with you, the connection, the understanding, the feeling that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, that's worth more than any amount of money or property." Ethan's eyes softened as he gazed at her. "You truly mean that, don't you?" "With all my heart." He pulled her closer, wincing slightly as the movement tugged at his healing wound. "I love you, Katherine Sullivan. I think I have since the moment I held my hat over your head in that rainstorm." "And I love you, Ethan Walker," she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Rain or shine, wealth or poverty, I love you." By late September, Ethan was well enough to travel. They bid farewell to Dr. Simmons and set out for Malad City, traveling slowly to accommodate Ethan's still recovering strength. The journey gave them time to talk about practical matters. The school term would be starting again soon, and Katherine was eager to return to her teaching. Ethan would need to focus on rebuilding his herd and making the ranch viable with limited resources. "It won't be easy," he warned as their wagon rolled through the beautiful autumn landscape. "I may have to take on extra work this winter just to make ends meet." "We'll manage," Katherine assured him, "and perhaps I can help. I've been thinking about offering additional lessons in the evenings for adults who want to improve their reading and writing. It would bring in a little extra money." Ethan looked at her with admiration. You're remarkable, you know that. Most women would be reconsidering their attachment to a man in my position, Katherine smiled. I'm not most women, no, he agreed, taking her hand. You're certainly not. Their return to Malad City caused quite a stir. The town had recovered from the influenza epidemic, though not without losses, and the sight of Katherine and Ethan arriving together prompted much speculation and gossip. Mrs. Harrison welcomed them warmly, insisting that Ethan stay with her and her husband until he was fully recovered. That old ranch house is no place for a man still healing, she declared in a tone that brooked no argument. Katherine resumed her teaching duties, her heart lighter despite the challenges she knew they faced. The children were delighted to have her back, and she threw herself into her work with renewed enthusiasm. Ethan, meanwhile, began the slow process of rebuilding. He sold some of his less essential possessions to raise capital, took on work breaking horses for neighboring ranches, and spent long hours making repairs to his property that he had previously hired others to do. Their courtship continued through these difficult times, growing stronger for the trials they faced together. They saw each other almost daily, and on Sundays, they would go to the ranch, where Ethan proudly showed Katherine the improvements he was making bit by bit. One crisp October evening, Ethan invited Katherine to the ranch for supper. "I've been working on something special," he said mysteriously when he picked her up in his wagon. "I want to show you." The ranch house, when they arrived, was transformed. Ethan had cleared out one of the rooms that had been used for storage, painted the walls, repaired the floor, and furnished it simply but attractively with a desk, a bookshelf, and a comfortable chair. "I thought you might need a place of your own here," he explained as Katherine looked around in amazement. "For your books and papers, a place to work or just to have some quiet time." Tears sprang to Katherine's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Ethan, it's perfect." "There's more," he said, taking her hand and leading her to the fireplace in the main room. A small fire crackled there, warming the otherwise chilly house. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Katherine's breath caught as he dropped to one knee before her. "Katherine Sullivan," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness evident in his eyes. "I know I'm not offering you the life of luxury you left behind in Boston. The ranch is struggling and the future is uncertain. But I promise you this. I will work every day of my life to make you happy, to build a home and a family with you, to be the kind of man you deserve." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Katherine felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly and then stood to gather her in his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. "It was my mother's," he said when they finally parted, nodding toward the ring. "One of the few things of value I didn't sell. I've been saving it for this moment." "It's beautiful," Katherine assured him, admiring the way the pearl caught the firelight, and all the more precious for its history. They decided on a December wedding, enough time to make preparations, but not so long that they would have to wait through the entire winter. The town embraced the news enthusiastically, with many offering help and support for the upcoming celebration. "It'll be the social event of the year," Mrs. Harrison declared as she helped Katherine select fabric for her wedding dress. "Everyone will be there." And indeed, it seemed the entire population of Malad City and the surrounding area turned out for the wedding of Ethan Walker and Katherine Sullivan on a bright, cold December day. The small church was packed to capacity as Katherine walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant ivory dress that she and Mrs. Harrison had worked on together for weeks. Ethan, standing at the altar in a new black suit, looked at her with such love and pride that Katherine felt her heart might overflow with happiness. As they exchanged their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. The celebration afterward was joyous, a potluck feast in the town hall, with music and dancing that continued well into the evening. Katherine looked around at the community that had embraced her, at the man who had become her husband, and marveled at how much her life had changed in less than a year. Later that night, as Ethan carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, their home, now Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west seeking independence and a fresh start, never imagining that she would find love with a cowboy who had held his hat over her head on a rainy day. Their first months of marriage were both challenging and beautiful. The winter was harsh, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but their small house was warm with love and shared dreams. Katherine continued teaching at the schoolhouse, while Ethan worked tirelessly to improve the ranch's prospects. By spring, their efforts were beginning to show results. The adult reading classes Katherine had started were well attended and bringing in additional income. Ethan had secured a contract to supply horses to the cavalry at a nearby fort, which promised to be more stable and profitable than the cattle drives. As the snow melted and the first wildflowers appeared on the prairie, Katherine discovered that their family would be growing. The news of her pregnancy filled both her and Ethan with joy and a renewed sense of purpose. "A child," Ethan said in wonder, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Our child." "The first of many, I hope," Katherine replied, covering his hand with her own. "As many as you want," he promised, kissing her tenderly. The coming months brought further prosperity to the Walker Ranch. Ethan's horses gained a reputation for quality, and buyers began seeking him out specifically. Katherine continued teaching until the end of the school term, then focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. Their daughter, Emma, was born on a warm September evening in 1877, with Mrs. Harrison acting as midwife. She had Katherine's golden hair and Ethan's warm brown eyes, and from the moment they held her, both parents were completely besotted. "She's perfect," Ethan whispered, cradling his daughter with hands that seemed suddenly too large and rough for such a delicate task. "She is," Katherine agreed, exhausted but radiant with happiness. The years that followed brought both joys and sorrows, as all lives do. The Walker Ranch prospered, eventually becoming one of the most successful in the territory. Katherine returned to teaching part-time after Emma's first birthday, bringing her daughter with her to the schoolhouse. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Samuel, and 3 years after that, another daughter, Grace. Their home, once a small, drafty cabin, was expanded and improved until it became a comfortable, welcoming farmhouse that was often filled with friends and neighbors. There were difficult times too: harsh winters, economic downturns, illnesses, and the normal strains of building a life together on the frontier. But through it all, Ethan and Katherine's love remained steadfast, growing deeper and richer with each passing year. On a rainy spring afternoon in 1886, a decade after their first meeting, Ethan and Katherine stood on the porch of their home, watching their children splash in puddles despite their mother's half-hearted admonitions to stay dry. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked suddenly, his arm around Katherine's waist. "Coming west, marrying a rough cowboy instead of some Boston gentleman." Katherine looked up at him in surprise. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This life, our life, is more than I ever dreamed possible." Ethan smiled and pulled her closer. "Do you remember that day outside Harrison's store, when I held my hat over your head? How could I forget? It was the beginning of everything," he chuckled. "I saw you standing there, looking like a drowned kitten but still so proud and dignified, and I thought to myself, that's the most beautiful woman I've ever laid eyes on. And I thought you were just being kind to the bedraggled newcomer," Katherine teased. "Oh, there was nothing just about it," Ethan assured her. "I fell in love with you right then and there, Katherine Walker." She reached up to touch his face, now lined with a decade of sun and laughter. "And I with you, though I was too stubborn to admit it at first." "Stubborn, you?" He laughed. "I never would have guessed." Their laughter mingled with the sound of the rain and their children's delighted shrieks. As Ethan bent to kiss her, Katherine reflected that sometimes the greatest adventures begin in the most unexpected ways, like standing outside a store in the rain, with a kind cowboy holding his hat over your head. And as the years continued to pass, that rainy day remained a cherished memory, a reminder of how a simple act of kindness had changed both their lives forever. Their love story, born in the wild Idaho territory, continued to unfold across the decades, a testament to the power of taking chances, of finding courage, and of recognizing love when it appears, even in the most unexpected circumstances. By their 30th wedding anniversary in 1906, Ethan and Katherine Walker had become pillars of the community in what was now the state of Idaho. Their children were grown with families of their own. Their ranch was thriving under the joint management of Ethan and their son Samuel, and Katherine had founded a small library that served the educational needs of the now substantial town. And sometimes, on rainy days, Ethan would still hold his hat over Katherine's head as they walked together, a private joke and a loving reminder of the day their story began when a Boston schoolteacher stood outside the store in the rain, and a cowboy's simple gesture of kindness changed both their lives forever.